Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishna Yevamos, Parak Test, Chapter 9, Mishna Gimel, Mishna 3. We're in the middle of the Mishnah. And I'd like to dedicate this Mishnah in memory of Reverend Mordechai Leader, who passed away a few days ago. Our learning of Mishnah should be an aliyah for his neshama, Mordechai Ozer Yosef ben Harav Shalom. Shem Hashem and aliyah.
Amen.
Okay. So we had mentioned in the beginning of the Mishnah, the Shniyos Medivrei Seifrim, the secondary forbidden relatives. The Torah tells us, has a list of arayos, of the relatives, either through blood or through marriage, that are forbidden to marry. They carry a death penalty for doing so. And then we have the relatives that the Chacham, the sages, forbade. And we had mentioned before that we mentioned them in the context of Yibum, of, let's say, they were forbidden to the husband, not forbidden to his brother, or vice versa. And now we're just going to talk about some laws that relate, or actually that relate to one of these women who are, again, an erva, forbidden relative midrabanan, actually in contrast to a situation where a person would actually marry a woman that is forbidden from the Torah. So the Mishnah says like this: Ein la, referring against to the woman who marries a man, and she is a secondary, or he is, whichever it is, they are secondary relatives to them and forbidden midrabanan. Ein la loy ksuba, she does not get her ksuba. Right? There's a ksuba in the marriage contract. There is something that a woman is promised, and that in case where the marriage ends, either in a divorce or in ksuba, divorce or death, and a typical woman gets her ksuba, and in this case she doesn't. Now, I'm going to go through each one, and it's important to know that the reason why this woman, again, she's legally married, right? According to Torah law, she's married. She can't just go marry somebody else. She needs to get. She's 100% married. However, the Chachamim penalized. The Chachamim took away these benefits from her in order to discourage her from going through this kind of marriage. So the first thing mentioned is Ein la ksuba. She does not have a ksuba. So let me read to you from the bottom here in the notes how they explain it. The ksuba is the marriage contract in which the terms of marriage are recorded. The Mishnah refers specifically to the payment awarded to the wife in the event of divorce or death of the husband. That amount is 200 zuz, or whether it's the actual money or property worth that, if she was a virgin at the time of their marriage, or 100 zuz for a non-virgin. That's what we're referring to about getting ksuba. And the Mishnah says this secondary erva is not entitled to this payment if the husband divorces her, if he dies. Okay? Now, there is something else in the ksuba called Tanai ksuba. Those are additions. Well, yeah, those are, I think it's called Tanai ksuba. Additions. Additional monies that he may promise her. The additional monies that he promises her on his own, that he has to pay her. But the set amount that was established, that set amount she doesn't get. Okay, so that's the first part. Ein la ksuba. She doesn't get a ksuba. V'loi peiros, she doesn't get fruit. Now, what does this mean? This means like this. Remember, we spoke about the concept of nichsei malug, which means a woman who brings property into her marriage that always remains hers, but the usage of it is the husband's domain. So here, under this arrangement, the husband is entitled to enjoy the produce or profits of the property, but he may not diminish the principal. The property itself remains hers to be returned to her intact in the event of a divorce or the husband's death. Okay? So that's malug. You use the property, the fruits that grow, he eats. The property, though, remains hers. And that property has to go back intact to her in case the marriage ends. What we're talking about here is like this. At the end of the day, because she is a secondary erva and they're not supposed to be married, in this kind of situation, he should not be eating the produce. Let's just take that for a given right now. Based on the fact that they're not supposed to be married, he doesn't get the produce. I believe the reason for this is, and it's brought down here in the Bar Tanura, is, just 1 second. No, that's not that one. Fruits, right? 1 second. Right. The Bartanura explains that the reason why the sages gave the man the usage, the peiros, the fruits, the benefits, is because that's in place of his obligation to redeem her. Now, if you're not supposed to be married to her, then you don't put the obligation of redeeming her if she's taken captive on you. And therefore, she doesn't have the right to the fruits. So if he eats the fruits from this marriage, he should pay her back, right? He had no right to eat them. He should be paying her back. And we say, nope, doesn't do that. In a situation where, again, the marriage ends, he doesn't pay her back for the fruits that he ate, that he consumed, even though, according to the letter of the law, he shouldn't have been doing so. V'lo mezainis, nor is he obligated to feed her. Right? This woman gets married to this guy, and guess what? He doesn't have to feed her. Right? That's a good reason to discourage her from getting married. And not only that, this halach extends to the following situation. Let's say he goes on a long trip, right? And she needs to eat. So what does she? There's no husband there to feed her. What does she do? So under any circumstance like that, whether it's a forbidden marriage or not, she goes and she borrows money from someone to buy food. Now, who's got to pay that? Who's got to pay up that loan at the end of the day? The husband. If he's obligated to feed her, then he has to pay up the loan for the money that she needed to borrow in order to feed herself. Well, in this case, where she's not supposed to be married, we want them to get divorced. He's not going to, not only is he not feed her, doesn't have to feed her, but if she borrows money to feed herself, he doesn't have to pay. Okay, that's what it means, v'loy mezainis, and not food. V'loy belois, nor for the loss of the value of her worn out property. Again, she brought into the marriage certain garments. And who has the right to use those garments? He does. But since they're nichsei malug, these are things that belong to her the whole time and goes back to her at the end of the marriage. If, let's say, he uses it to the point that they wear out, now he's got to replace it because the print, meaning what she brings in, she has to get back. If they're still intact, right, no matter what kind of bad shape they are, he just gives it back to her. But if, let's say, he actually fell apart because he used it so much, typically in a regular marriage, he'd have to, if the marriage ends, whether through divorce or death, in the case of death, it's from his estate, she would get back the value of those garments. Not in this case where they're not supposed to be married, where she was a erva shnia, where she was a rabbinic prohibited relative. Va'avolad kosher. Now, the child born from this marriage is kosher. That means, in a case of an erva, according to Torah law, if a person has a child with an erva, child's a mamzer. In the case of the Rabbanan making their forbidden relatives, they didn't go as far as to say that the child is rabbinically considered a mamzer. The child is kosher. And we force him to divorce her. You know, when they had the power to actually force, they'd force him to divorce her. All right. So these are the halachas when it comes to the erva, to this woman who is an erva shniya, b'divrei seifrim. She is a rabbinic forbidden relative. All these penalties. Now, the next thing you're going to go ahead and see in the next part of the Mishnah may be a bit surprising. Almana l'kohen gadol. In a case where an almana is married to a kohen gadol, that is not permitted. That's permitted according to Torah law. Gerusha v'chalutza l'kohen hedget. If let's say you have a gerusha, divorcee, or a chalutza. Chalutza means chalitza was done with her. Now, chalutza is midrabanan, that's rabbinic in nature. But one understands that chalutza, the reason why the sages forbade a chalutza is because it's similar to a gerusha, it's similar to a divorcee. And therefore, that rabbinic decree of chalutza is going to have the same power, is going to be considered the same as a Torah prohibition. That's gerusha v'chalutza l'kohen hedget, a divorcee, a woman had chalitza done to her, to a regular kohen, mamzeres unasina liyisrael. Let's say the woman is a mamzeres, or she's an asina, and asina again is from the Canaanite tribe that approached Yeshua, disguised themselves as foreigners, got Yeshua to convert them, and then it was discovered that they really were Canaan and should have been killed. But once they were converted, they remained converts, and eventually the sages made them forbidden. But again, they're typically given the same status as a mamzer or mamzeres, or a bas Yisrael and a sin mamzer, or let's say a woman kosher lineage who's married to the sin mamzer. All these are examples of marriages forbidden according to Torah law. What about all the things we mentioned until now? Yesh lahen ksuba. All the benefits, all the regular benefits of marriage, they get. They get them. Although they're forbidden to be married according to Torah law, they still get those benefits. Isn't that interesting? The ones forbidden according to rabbinic law, they lose the benefits. The ones who are married against Torah law, they have the benefits. That's the pshat. How do we explain that? And the answer is, the way explained is that essentially, if you're married, and the Torah recognized your marriage, the right should be there. The sages penalized. The sages took it away. Why? Because we find very often a concept that the sages had to strengthen their decrees sometimes more than protecting Torah prohibitions. There are certain decrees they had to do to strengthen their decrees. So it's like this. When you're dealing with a forbidden marriage, a woman is forbidden to marry, you're forbidden to marry this woman according to rabbinic law. The sages felt they have to be stricter there because people don't always take it as serious. Rabbinic law, they don't take so serious. And therefore, without the penalties, there's a greater chance that people are going to ignore the decree. But when it comes to a Torah prohibition, you don't need these decrees because typically people keep them. It's a Torah prohibition. People take that serious. And since they take it serious, you don't need the decrees. And therefore, it'll come out that in a case of a forbidden rabbinic marriage, it'll be stricter than a forbidden Torah marriage. And one last thing on the Mishnah. When the Mishnah says, the Mishnah said that in all these cases where the women are forbidden according to Torah law to marry, yesh len ksuba, they have the ksuba, etc., plus all the other benefits. The one difference is that when it comes to mezainis, when it comes to feeding her, giving her money for food, okay, giving her food. Actually, let me read you how it says here. They say here that she only receives money for food if, in the husband's absence, she had to borrow money for this purpose and he died. We said it before. He's gone. There's no one to feed her. So what does he do? What does she do? She borrows money to be able to feed herself. And then, and then let's say he divorced her, he died. Now she wants to get paid back from his estate. So there we say that in the case where it was a forbidden marriage according to Torah law, she can go to the estate and collect the money that she had to lay out to feed herself. However, in his lifetime, the husband has no obligation to feed her or pay her debt. Meaning, why? Since he is required by Torah to divorce her, it would make no sense to apply any law that might encourage them to stay together. After death, however, this reasoning does not apply. She may claim compensation from his estate. So in a situation where he died, then she gets her mezainis, she gets her food. In a case where she had to borrow money to feed herself. But as long as they are actually alive, he's alive, there is no obligation for him to feed her or to pay any kind of debt that she had to take out in order to feed herself. Okay. Let's do the Chofetz Chaim. All right. Another thing that's important to know. Can you speak Lashon Hara about somebody who passed on?
Not supposed to.
Why is it Torah law? So it says like this. Even to disgrace or to shame someone who has passed on is also forbidden. There is a enactment and even a chayrim, that means even excommunication from the early times, not to spread any kind of rumor or any kind of bad name on those who have passed on. Which I understand that it's not necessarily Torah law, but something that was decreed not to do that. And this is even if the person who passed on was ignorant. All the more so if we're talking about someone who was a Torah scholar. To go in and disgrace the Torah scholar even after his death is considered a very grave sin, which you can be excommunicated for. Okay. The prohibition of shaming or disgracing a Torah scholar is even about himself. You say something about him. You're not degrading his scholarship, you're degrading him. That again, that's included in this very severe sin. All the more so to disgrace the words of Torah that he taught. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, everybody.